Hello. Hi. Straightening my thing here. How's everyone? Can you all hear me? I don't even know how many people are here. Oh, okay. Hello. Hi, Rusty, Calvin, Set Free Indeed. Hello. I hope you're all here. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm not using my streaming software. I'm just logged into YouTube, so sometimes it doesn't work as well. Hello. Hi, Rusty. I'll just wait for others to arrive. Hi, Doreen. Great. Thanks, Virginia. Hello, Sarah. I haven't seen some of you for a while. Hey, B. Nichols. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Susanna. I'm just going to go. I have to just jump away for 1 second. I'll be right back. Thanks. There's a bit of noise coming in the window. Hi, Tyler. Hey, Brent. Wow, a lot of people coming in. So good to see you all. It's kind of a midweek thing, which I don't normally do. So it's like in my work week, actually. So, but I just figured I would do something different because I'm meeting with Jason Jack over the weekend. We'll be recording, and I don't know what day yet we'll have that posted, but it'll be sometime next week. So just keep an eye out for that. Yeah. So really good to see everybody. We have 67 people. We'll give it a few minutes. And today I'm just going to go through some of my travel with my husband, and I went to England and France. And so I'm just going to share some of the findings. Nothing like heavy, just generally kind of a walkthrough and showing where we went and some of the intentions, I guess, behind why we went to these places, and just what I found from a little season post-millennial reign perspective. It was quite fun to do that. I do it a lot where I live here, but it's not often you get the opportunity to go to a totally different place and see what it looks like there and kind of uncover some things. So that was good. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it feels, I think it was 2 days ago. So it would have been like the 22nd, I think. A guy named William on TikTok sort of posted about my channel and the Land of Jesus video. So it went a little bit crazy. So I've been a little bit busy just trying to keep up with that. But I wanted to just give him a shout out for posting about my channel. And, you know, the more people that get the word, that's the main thing. It's not about me at all. It's about the Lord Jesus. And we just want everyone to know that, hey, you guys, he did what he said he was going to do. He came, he conquered, and he sits on the throne. And I think that's just a really powerful realization to have. And when Christians come to that realization in this time, especially as things get more and more intense, I think it's going to be exactly what people need to hear. So, you know, I was speaking with somebody the other day, and we were just saying how this is the time where we're the people that are going to be standing in the gap, pointing them to the information. And I think that's just, you know, something that we can thank God for, that we have this position in this time to do this job, and he's chosen us. So we are blessed, and he's a good father, and he will take care of us. So how are you all feeling today? Are you encouraged? Are you feeling joy? There's a lot of things that can bring us down, but we know the joy of the Lord is our strength. So let's rest in that, because that really is the answer. He's conquered it all. You know, he defeated all the enemies. There is, you know, something that I think about a lot is in this time, we have the enemy still here, but just for a short time. And all they can do is deceive. And I think that's something to just remember. It's dangerous, obviously, but it is something that I think with the strength of the Lord, the power of the Holy Spirit, the joy of the Lord, fellowship, encourage one another. There's a lot of people that react in fear, and they react badly, unfortunately, because of that. And I think it's really important that we just encourage each other. We really step forward in faith, and just remember that we have God on our side. There's nothing to fear. So just join me in that. I think there's we're one of the small pockets in, I would call, the alternative community. I don't really like the term conspiracy. We're like a Christian community, but we have alternative understanding of eschatology. And I think that puts us in a sweet spot, because we know that we're not waiting for these terrible things to happen. We're actually waiting for the end. And that's a wonderful position to be in. So we don't need to argue. We don't need to fight. We don't need to be at each other's throats like a lot of people might be doing right now. We can really stand on God's word and trust him through the time that we're going through. So I'm really glad to have you all along with me. And because I'm on the YouTube platform streaming, sometimes the shares actually drop. So I will be sharing some, some pictures, and I want to just make sure they actually get on the screen. So I will be opening some photos here. So we went to England and we went to France. And then after I go through those and talk through some of the things that I thought while I was there, I do want to also give an update from our boots on the ground person who we were all praying for. And so I can give you an update on that as well after I've gone through the photos and the travel update. And I also want to, if I have time, get to comments. So I've collected loads of comments over the last probably year and a half. You might be surprised. Some of you might actually see one of your comments in here because I have a lot. I do screenshot them because we have such an intelligent group of people, and it's sometimes pretty humbling just to know that, there's people out there that are doing their own research, and they know a lot of stuff. They've been thinking about these things, and they've been looking into them independently. And so I think it's really encouraging just to know that we're actually part of a very big group of people that are studying things outside of the traditional, education, shall we say. So I'll start with this photo, and let me know if you can see that. Shoot. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is actually a place called Helmsley in Yorkshire. So we went to Yorkshire. My husband's family my husband's from there. So we went to Yorkshire, and there's a place called Helmsley. And this is kind of a castle up on the hill. And have a butt. No. Just chat here. I am actually moderating my own chat here, so give me a second. Okay. Alrighty. Hang on one second. Yeah, I think I got that one. Okay. Thank you for commenting on that. Okay, so I have, we went to Yorkshire and this place called Helmsley, and it's just, it's a really sweet village. We walked around there and did a few things, but this is just a remnant that I think is, it's just interesting to look at. We had to go, you'd have to go up a hill to get to it. And really it's very ruined, as you can see. But that's just a little bit of what we saw. This one is in Manchester. This is one of the beautiful kind of buildings. The entrance is on the corner, which I love that they did that in the old buildings. You didn't always go in like on a flat front of the house, of the building. You could come in on the corner, and I just think that's pretty cool. And just the entrances are so ornate, and the buildings are, you know, I like how they've kept it in a very original sort of decor, and they haven't, doesn't look like they've actually done too much to this one other than maybe just keep it up. So I really like that one. And yeah, okay. And one thing I noticed, so we went to this beautiful place. It was actually an old cathedral. They've made it into, and I noticed that they're doing this with a lot of the very old churches and other buildings. They're making them into pretty much eateries. There's probably, I would say most of the newer remodels are being made either into apartments or into restaurants. And so that's what this is. And it does make for a very beautiful restaurant. You can see here, just mute that. So you can see here how it's kind of decked out. It's pretty cool, but, you know, I'm not sure if this church was at one time, you know, glorifying the Lord through songs and hymns and spiritual songs, whether, you know, a restaurant and bar is really the way to go. But yeah, that's kind of what's happening with a lot of these old cathedrals. And that was in Nottingham. So we went there as well. And this is the oldest house in Nottingham, or building, I should say. I think it's actually an old hotel. So you got that really old timber look to it, which is pretty cool. I love those old buildings. It looks like it's not really being used for anything, but that was pretty neat. And we had the full tour because we obviously have family there. So that was pretty special. And then walking along the canals again. So a lot of these old factories have been repurposed as bars and restaurants. And, you know, really nice place to sit and have something to eat. But you can see the old factory style where the, you know, boats would probably go in with their load of cotton or linens or whatever. And these canals are basically just used for holiday boats. So they're called narrow boats. And you can just see one there. So that's pretty much it. And then also, you know, you'll see people fishing. So I think there's fish in there. I don't know if they stock them or if they're now just kind of naturally reproducing in these canals. And again, more factory on the side of the canal there. And it's a nice walk too. So you could take your evening walk down the canal. It's quite nice. So again, you know, these old factories, you can see where the industrial side of the UK used the canals for so much transfer of, you know, materials for the industry. And Nottingham is known for lace, actually. That's one of the big things that Nottingham actually produced. And you can see a number of doors going up the building. And so they would have lifts, and they would lift, you know, off the barge, which was in the canal. They would lift the load into whichever floor they wanted it to be in. So they were very industrious, and I think they had a lot more machinery than we realize. The other thing about Nottingham is it's built on a cave system, and I never knew that before. But you can see here they've bricked up entrances, and I'll show you more pictures. But the street level being there, and so you can see there was like abodes down here, and I wonder how much of that is meltage. And you can see more here. So you walk around Nottingham, and there's just a lot of, you know, like bricked up openings in these cave areas. It's very, very cool. I was taking pictures of things that probably normal people wouldn't be taking pictures of, but it was fun. And so the castle, this is the castle wall in Nottingham, and you can see just how far down the doorway is under that castle wall. And just a lot of bricked up, yeah, just a ton of bricked up openings. Oop. I think I just jumped forward there. Sorry about that. Yeah. And that's a very high wall. And then there's just like layers. And I think the original, or at least, you know, where you would be walking if you were on the other side of the wall is like here. And I did look in, and I was like whistling just to see how big it was in there. But yeah, I'm pretty sure there's just long hallways. And here's more, and it just looks like solid rock, right? So the it is beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, Corey. Yeah, like the stream. I never say the right things, so I need someone out there telling people to like my video. And yeah, it's so medieval. This city is so medieval. It is truly fascinating. I wonder if they do tours into these little doors down here. It would be really interesting to do. I don't remember them saying if they do tours in the caves, but that would be fun to do. And they've even used, you know, just so this doesn't all cave in, they've used these props here to keep the rock from falling over. And some of these look more like actual castle doors, and even the shape of the arches, but you can see what looks like meltage here. Now, maybe they've put something over that to kind of preserve the rock, but it does look like meltage to me. And there's a lot of burning, like you can even see down here on the rock. It looks very dark, as if it's been burned. And this is all below the castle in Nottingham. I did take quite a few pictures because I wanted to show you all. And here stairs are going in. So I imagine under the castle, there's quite a network of tunnels. That would be assumable, I think. Now, as you come around the castle, kind of behind the castle, there's this very old pub, and it's built into the tunnel network as well. And it's called the Trip to Jerusalem Inn. And it's the oldest pub in England, 1189 AD. So yeah, so we went around that corner, and I find it interesting. It looks like there's earth on top of this old brick. How do you do that? That's a very strange building technique, if you ask me. But it would only make sense if the brick was there first, and then the earth actually was, I guess, mud flooded on top of it, and then they would have had to dig it out. So yeah, you'll see here. So this pub is the oldest inn in England, the Old Trip to Jerusalem, 1189. And I'll show you inside here in a minute. And it's got a sword. So I have a feeling, like I haven't actually done a lot of research into this pub, but I have a feeling it had to do with what they would call the Crusades. And it's very strange because it seems to be all over England. They have these trip to Jerusalem sort of locations, pilgrimage sites, including places like Canterbury Cathedral and others. And so, yeah, that's quite fascinating. Hi, Bora and Scottish Tart. Are you in Scotland, Scottish Tart, or do you live somewhere else now? Because this probably looks like home to you. And so you can see here there's cave actually showing there, and then there's brick right below it. And there's actually venting that comes out here. So, sorry, here. And then the castle wall is right kind of, there's like a, I don't know, that's a turret or a tower coming out of the wall of the castle. And so you go into here, into this door, and you basically walk into a cave. And this is inside the pub. So it's, the whole roof is basically cave. They've just put furnishings in there. And hang on. So I just took a picture of this. The chimney tower. This is one of the 2 large chimneys that could be found in Brewhouse Yard, carved from natural sandstone and visible on ancient maps of the area as they emerge throughout the top of the rock. So the flues are carried up some 30 feet or more through the rock to the level of the outer court of the castle, where they are finished off with brick stacks. The process of sweeping these unique flues is done from the top, the soot and sand falling down into the chamber below. It is not necessary to sweep these chambers very often, perhaps once every 20 years or so. On the last occasion, over 7 tons of soot and sand were removed from the site. I don't know when this was written, but there's also a message inside the pub saying, "You may have sand in your beer." So I thought that was quite funny. And I don't doubt it, because you'll see the picture. So this is kind of from inside and through the little window out into the courtyard. And you can see here, that's the chimney that they're talking about. And that's the roof of the pub. Hi, Pamela. Hello, everybody. I should say hi to people that are just joining. Welcome. All right, and that's kind of looking up the chimney, the sandstone chimney. And I'm going to fast forward through that because that was a video. It was funny, but it was probably not for this. Yeah, so this one here, now this one is actually in a little town called Pickering, and I'm sorry if it makes you feel sick. I was walking with my phone, but I just wanted to give you a little feel for walking up the court, up the little alleyway to the church. And once we got to the church, I'll show you how that, what I found there. Hi, Adam is Loopy. Welcome. And be thankful. Hello. Ancient residue. Hi. Picasso. Hello. So the churchyard. And at the top there, it's quite interesting. I'll get a little bit of a close-up on it. But it's like a cross and a wreath. I don't know what that actually means. If anybody knows, let me know. I just zoom in on it here. And yeah, it's just something that I've seen in kind of more pagan pictures of, let's say, post-World War II Germany. Anyway, so this is the entrance, and we'll go into the main church area. Now, the one thing I noticed right away was these huge artwork depictions on the walls. And I was like, what are these? And they look very old. I don't know exactly when they were painted, but this is a very old church. So that's the martyring of St. Edmund, I think. And so they're showing a lot of the saints and the stories of medieval, actually, times. And this is the beheading of John the Baptist. Very, very striking images. And there she's handing the plate to Herod and his wife with his head on it. Yeah, really gruesome. It feels like the medieval people, I don't know, I guess this is their way of telling stories and leaving artifacts. This is St. Christopher. I haven't looked too much into his story, but he has something to do in Catholic tradition with Jesus as a boy. And I don't know, obviously, how true that is, but obviously I don't think it is because he's never mentioned in scripture. And then you can just see the snakes around his feet. So he carried, I guess what the point of that story is that Jesus carried the weight of the world, and then this St. Christopher carried him when he was little. These are obviously myths, but this is St. George and the Dragon. And again, this is another myth that seems to, in the Catholic tradition, supersede the story of Gabriel binding the dragon or Satan and putting him in the bottomless pit. And then Jesus actually being the one who ultimately defeats the enemy. And this is Jesus. This is a depiction of Jesus coming up out of the grave. And you can see the soldiers falling back. And there's his grave and there's his feet. Yeah, Tyler, it was amazing. It was truly awe-inspiring. This was one of the first places that we went. So I was just, yeah, I was pretty amazed at what I was seeing. And you can't see them very well, actually, when you're standing below, especially with the light from the windows coming in. So I had to really zoom in. And I even kind of looked at it more after because I couldn't see it properly with my eyes because they're very faint. But this one here is Hellmouth, and that's Jesus delivering people from the dead, from hell, from Hades. And that's a very famous depiction, I think, in a lot of old medieval artwork. And some of these at the top are other saints, and I think the apostles, possibly, the stories of the apostles. So all of this painting on the top of the, like on the walls of the upper walls of this church are just stunning. And it must have taken them years to do, especially with, say, the materials that they had. And just more here. And then some of these actually start to look a little bit more pagan, or I think these are Jesus defeating the false gods and taking them into prison or putting them into judgment. So, or into hell, I guess, into the, yeah, you can see there like that. These are kind of what look like Hindu gods to me. They're like the false gods, and they're being taken away, which is really interesting. So I think that's it for that video. And as we came through the little village, I thought that was a pretty picture, just looking up at the church through this little alleyway. And there's the baptismal. So all of these old churches have these really old baptismals, and then they have kind of a secret area behind these doors, which I guess is kind of a little chapel for duties of priests and things like that. And this was very nice organ. It was nice to see it still intact. I think a lot of organs have been decommissioned in sort of newer churches. So these old churches have their organs still in place, which is nice. Hi, Karen and Deborah. And hello, Hanging with Maddie. Good to have you all here. Interestingly, this was kind of a side door. So this was like a little prayer chapel to the side. And I'll show you what was kind of on the front of it. So I was just looking through the door here. And I did go in. So it's basically like an altar, and there's little candles on there and things. And you can just sit in there and pray. Unfortunately, I think it's quite pagan. And this is the pronunciation, or where the angel told Mary she was going to be bearing the Messiah. But unfortunately, they make it look like Mary is a goddess and this angel is worshiping her in a way, which is, just one of the things we have to pick up as we go through all the iconography of the Catholic faith. Now, this one is a little bit backwards. I'm going to skip forward here. So this man, his name in this church in Pickering, his name is Robert King. And I found out that he was actually my husband pointed this out. He was surveyor of the city of Washington, D.C. in the first year of the 19th century. Did not expect to find this kind of relation to this little town in Yorkshire in England. And so basically there's some depictions here of his surveying of Washington, D.C. Now, my question is, they were surveying and drawing pictures of all of this. So the buildings must have already been there. And the land was already like plotted out, and they didn't allow much detail to be printed on these. Like, it's all kind of blurry. But yeah, so here you can see the rivers and yeah, pretty much everything here. So a map of the city of Washington in the District of Columbia. And that's that guy from Pickering in Yorkshire in England. This guy. He's looking very closely at his paper. So I actually went to the front of the Cathedral church, and this was quite interesting as well. So they have the British flag and the American flag hanging together at the front of this little church. Hi, Erin. Hi, Scooby. Misnomer, hello. Yeah, so I'll pause it here. Actually, I zoom in a little bit here. So, for the glory of God, to commemorate the brotherhood in arms for justice, truth, and freedom between Britain and U.S. America, and to mark Pickering's share in creating the capital of the United States. As above recorded, these flags were presented by Reverend C.S. Wood, rector of Roselle, New York, August 1918. And we have two angels on either side. And the other thing I noticed is there's an X at the top. And I know that the X is quite related to I believe, the Gog Magog agenda. The X is symbolic of that overall Nimrod scheme that they're all playing to, that playbook that they're all playing to. So, yeah. So this church is actually commemorated to the Brotherhood in Arms and the construction or the creating of the capital of the United States. Very interesting find. So this brass is erected to commemorate, again, it says the same thing, and their alliance in the Red Cross, which is actually something else that's very much related to the secret societies. The Rosy Cross, as Jana will tell you, she's done a lot of work on the puzzle picture, talking about things like the Red Cross. And they show the Red Cross on pretty much everything, including the St. George's flag, so the flag of England, the flag of Britain, and a lot of other, the Swiss, for example. There's a lot of flags with the actual Red Cross on it. Swiss might actually be a white cross, but nonetheless, the Red Cross is very symbolic of the secret societies. And then I just have some pictures here of what the gravestones actually look like. So there were some very old gravestones, but a lot of them actually look like this. And I have wondered in the past whether, due to cataclysm and mud flooding and other kinds of events, like even meltage, if these were just repositioned and had been damaged in an event, and when they tidied up, if they just put all of as many gravestones back up as they could that maybe weren't completely broken. That's just something I've wondered. And then the other thing, I'm not going to go too much into these people, but in Pickering, there is actually what's called Society of Friends Quaker Meeting House. Now, a lot of people think that the Quakers are kind of like just a really nice Amish Christian community. The truth is they're not. They're very Gnostic, and they're very much, I don't know, they're very related to the Puritans that came across to North America. And we'll go into that in some of our future videos. I've covered a little bit of the Puritans as they appeared in history in my Hell's Spells video, and that was really just exposing the part they played in a lot of the early liberty movement, liberty cult, academia particularly, as well as pharmakia and things like that. So the Quakers were kind of the religious organization, Society of Friends, and they actually helped a lot of those groups move over to America. So they call themselves friends, and you have societies, secret societies that call each other brother or brethren, and then these people call each other friends. And these are special words that they use. They often posed as preachers. They were very Hebraic in their preaching, and they were actually not very well liked by the people around them. And so they did receive some persecution. I think coming out of the millennial reign, it would have been quite interesting to see the factions of people that were grouping together and forming alliances and things like that. So they all had their special take on, I guess, what the truth is, right? And a lot of them, people like the Quakers, don't really focus on Jesus. And that's a big clue, as to either more Hebraic or Gnostic positions in terms of their faith and their belief systems. A little bit like today, people can be nice people, but they don't necessarily believe in Jesus. They might do nice things. They might be very natural in terms of their approach to medicine or their eating habits or whatever. They might grow gardens, but if they don't believe in Jesus, that's a big, that's going to be a problem for them down the road. Take care, EW. I hope you have a good night. Hi, Rise and Shine. I'm just talking here. I hope everyone's having a good night. I can see you all in the chat, and it's great to be connecting with people again. It's been a while since I've done a live, so I'm just rattling off things. I have quite a lot to cover. Hey, Jana. Friend. She's not friend like a Quaker friend. She's got the puzzle picture channel, so go check out her content. She's really good. And okay, so yeah, so you can see here they've actually there was no description with this picture, but it looks like they have bound this person and they're going to put them in jail, and that is a Quaker there. So we went in and they let us walk around. So we looked at this. This is one of their meeting assembly halls, and they tend to pretty much just congregate on chairs, I think, in like circles and talk. Yeah. And so Friends Meeting Burial Grounds, these are just some artifacts on the wall. And I think they may have been involved in some of the early, like, stop drinking movements. I can't remember the name. Don't drink alcohol kind of thing. But yeah, so you can see how they may have been related to Puritans in a way, and sort of that more Amish Mennonite communities that came out of Europe after the millennial reign. And I think this is a beautiful old schoolhouse. So they had a girls' door and a boys' door down there. And it's just really interesting to see some of these old buildings now being sold and probably repurposed as apartments or even restaurants and things like that. The other thing in Pickering is like AA, be thankful. That could be. Yeah, it's kind of culty, I would say. Yeah, that's an insight for sure. I should look at some more comments here. Yeah, I looked into Quakers, Doreen, because I was curious about where they actually stood in terms of, the gospel. But it really isn't that. They do believe more in a Gnostic version of anything biblical. It would just be twisted into kind of that inner light. We all share this oneness. It's kind of that singularity approach. So yeah, I was surprised. I thought they would be more scriptural, but they're not actually. They're a little bit more do good, like each other, be kind, which is great, but there's more to it than that, right? So this is the train, Northeast Rail, I think it's called. This is in Pickering, and it's just a lovely place. You can go and You can get on a traditional train car and go for a train ride on a real actual train. And there's a weigh scale for parcels, and the old bench and the old clock, so you aren't late for your train. Yeah, it's very cultish misnomer. I would agree. Yes, Jenna, agreed. We got religion after the millennial reign instead of reality. Yeah, we were sold a lot of lies, that's for sure. So there's just a map, and I really like looking at these maps and things because it shows you the scale of just how much rail was laid in what they would tell you is quite a short time frame. I don't have dates exactly, but it's very complex, and they go to every little town, and many stops along the way. Thousands of miles of train, I would say. So that was fun. And this is actually a castle in Pickering. So there's castles. They're all quite ruined, I would say, in England. And I think there was a lot more that went on than we realize. A lot more destroying of the old architecture and infrastructure. And that is actually back in the church, and it just describes what those paintings were. Then we went to York, and I just want to talk about sort of the places around York that are really, really interesting from a post-millennial reign perspective. So this is actually the Archbishop of York's residence in York, and it's actually a palace. So we're talking about the church, and we're talking about leadership. I think there was a big change, even though they would consider themselves to be Church of England Protestants. I do not see this as something the Lord Jesus would be living in, although they say that that he has like an apartment in the back of it. But just again, I think remembering how Jesus said, "Sell all you have and give to the poor," I find this a stark opposition to that. And beautiful place. It's actually by the river. It is an actual beautiful place, but really well preserved as well. But it has this gatehouse over here, and then you go in, and we didn't go in, but there's an area behind kind of in the trees that you can walk. So we walked back here, and there's this beautiful old, it's really just the front of a church left, and it's a ruin, and you're not allowed to go in there but you can see even gravestones all around this church. So very old, very forgotten. And these old kind of Celtic crosses in the trees just around where you're walking. And they have the old Celtic designs on them. They look a little newer than I expected them to, but then I visited this bookstore for about a day, which was wonderful. And I enjoyed going through some very rare books and was able to pick one up, which was a real result. I had a choice of many, but they're very expensive. So I got one, and I'm actually using it for some research that I'm doing over the next little while. I've done a load of research, which I'm going to share with everybody. I can't wait to get it out, but I wanted to sit and talk with everybody for a while before we get going with the next round of research. And so one of the really fascinating things of York, and I don't know how many people know this, but Constantine the Great was proclaimed the Roman emperor in York in what they say was 306 AD. Now, I want to put it out there that I don't actually know if his name was Constantine, if he existed, and if the dates are right. So we're starting with really ground zero on this. But just as a point in passing, it's really interesting that what they would call the head of Rome, Eastern Roman Empire, was actually proclaimed emperor in the city of York in North England. I mean, just try and process that for a minute. It's far from where they tell us Rome and even the Eastern Roman Empire were, which was what they tell us was Constantinople. But all of this together starts to build quite the mystery. So just think about Constantine being in York and actually being proclaimed the emperor there. Why would that be? These are some questions I think I really, mull over and I ruminate on quite a lot as I'm reading through material. And if anyone knows like more information on that, definitely post in the comments. But you can see here just a little more information. Constantine the Great, near this place, was proclaimed Roman emperor in 306 AD. His recognition of the civil liberties of his Christian subjects and his own conversion to the faith established the religious foundations of Western Christendom. So this person, this historical character, was extremely influential in the way that we perform Christianity today. And one thing I want to highlight here is actually there's red and blue covered by a fleur-de-lis. That's very significant to me. And we're going to go into that more in our future studies. But just remember, the red, blue, and fleur-de-lis is associated with the Roman emperor who ruled throughout Christendom, allegedly, of the Byzantine era, the early Byzantine era. And there's just another symbol there. So that part is really fascinating, and we'll just keep going here. So some of the other things you'll see as you walk around, I'll just read some comments here. So Madeline, do you have a running list of rare books for research? We can keep an eye out for them. Olive, I have so many books that I could recommend. For the time being, I'm trying to get them all together to be able to share them with everybody, because I want to make like an accessible library that people can join us through the NFC, and they can just, either download or select books from the collection that we have, like an online place. That's what I'm trying to put together. And it is taking a long time. So, but yeah, I do have a whole bunch of books. I have hundreds, and I want to share them with everybody because I think the more people that have access, the better, right? And just remember, when you're reading through old, rare books, they're never going to tell you, like the high level view that they're going to tell you, you have to dig below and below and below, like layers below what you're reading. And I think, though, what really helps is knowing that the millennial reign happened, that they're hiding all of this. And if you can drill down with that in mind, you can usually see the connecting dots. And that's really super helpful. So, yeah. Let's see what else everybody's saying. So Janice said, I wonder if Constantine was not an emperor nor Roman, but rather a regional authority in the kingdom. Yeah, I mean, it's possible, since we know Rome may not be what they say it was. Oh no. Okay, Tyler, have a good night. Great to have you here. So yeah. And Adam Islupi says, lean toward Constantine being one of Jesus' saints. Then his story was rewritten for Catholic control after the millennial reign. Interesting. Because, interestingly, to that point, Adam, St. Peter is the patron saint of York. So is it possible that Peter held a position of leadership under Christ in the church, in that, what you just said, was that kind of just rewritten to say, oh, that was Constantine? Possibly. And then the dates too are way out, aren't they? Yeah. So that's a really interesting thing. But yeah, you see a lot of these, and these big clocks actually make me wonder why. I mean, I appreciate, they're trying to keep everyone aware of the time, but I wonder if there's more to all these big clocks around. And these lovely, town roads, walking areas for pedestrians. And a lot of cathedrals in Europe, England, and France, where we went, they're kind of empty. They're like a ruin, but they're just a shell. And then they've left the outer exterior just, for people to look at, I guess. They are beautiful, and you wouldn't want to take them down, but they're fairly empty, some of them. Like this is the inside of that exterior that I just showed you. And these old columns are super interesting. I think they look like they've been reconstructed, but they look like they've also been damaged with fire and a lot of bricked up doorways and things like that. So now this is on the York Minster. This is one of the, yeah, I gave up on dates too, Adam. I don't think we don't really need to worry about dates anyway, because we know the millennial reign happened when Jesus returned. So we have a structure to work with. And dates don't really mean anything when they're not right anyway. So as long as we know, we can kind of connect some dots, that's really, really the most important thing, right? This is one of the exterior things that I saw on the York Minster, and it's just this strange looking lamb, but it almost looks like it's been plastered over really badly, and it's looking the other direction. So it's very strange. It didn't make me feel very nice. I don't know, Zabian, what that actually is. I think it's a lamb just because of the shape of it, but it looks distorted and it looks a little bit odd. It's not looking out either. It's looking at the wall. So very strange, but it's up there. So you can see how high up it is as well. And so a lot of these little areas would have had statues in them, I guess, but those are not there. So you can see it's a beautiful cathedral, the Minster. And you can see there's just missing statues. Now, my understanding is that with Protestantism, all of the images were removed, and the Church of England is, Protestant by name. I think they're all controlled by Rome at this point, but this is at least how they show that they're different. And the only thing there is Queen Elizabeth and two of these like naves or whatever they are next to the door. But other than that, all of those positions are empty. And it's like vacancies, like they vacated the church. This is a model of basically the surrounding area around the Minster, and it's really cool. It looks like it's been done in brass, and it's gone a little bit oxidated or whatever they call it. And it actually says York Millennium Project. And apparently there was a project started in 2000 called the Millennium Project. And it kind of has to do with, I looked it up, and it has to do with kind of preserving a lot of the old history of York and that. So I just thought the naming of it was really interesting. Millennium Project. And yeah, and just the ornateness of these cathedrals is stunning. If you zoom in, you can just see the detail. People, as other people like to point out, people in this time with the, let's say, the poverty that we hear that they were crushed with, and the, crushing kind of life experiences they were having, yet were able to design such beautiful, ornate, and extremely, big. These are huge structures, even to the point of putting lots of decor and obviously love and care into these. And I always just notice the symmetry of everything. It's very symmetrical. Everything is numbered just right, and cymatic as well. So there's a lot of detail in these structures. And that's just it from a distance. So you can see the top of it there is what I would say built for harnessing atmospheric electricity and energy. And I have some theories about that, but I'll show you more when we go to the other pictures. And there's just the front of it. So it's been kept in really nice condition. I find a lot of the images that they have on here very odd looking people, I guess. I don't know. They look like a lot of the paintings we see from the medieval period. So yeah, I guess maybe that's what the people look like. They just look a little bit strange, but they have a lot of strange facial hair and stuff. So yeah, I think those are some there. And then this is a very old, what they call a Roman column that was dug up near the minster, and they have just rebuilt it there for. But what I did think was interesting is it says here, it was given by the dean and chapter to the York Civic Trust, who erected it on the site to mark the 1900th anniversary of the foundation of the city by the Romans in 71 AD. So York was founded by the Romans in AD 71. So considering the time frames that we know, that is also very interesting, because it seems to me that it's being almost conflated with like Rome. And I don't know how else to say that, but it does feel like it's almost being conflated with, a very central position in Rome, or in the Roman, what they call the Roman Empire. And this is the shambles in York, and there's lots of little stores through here. It's very old. There's even a shrine to a saint in there that you can go in and look at. I have a lot to cover in my France photos, so I'm kind of going through these fairly quickly, but there's a whole story of her execution, this Saint Margaret, and she was Catholic. So obviously the Protestants were taking Catholics and trying to make them into Protestants. That's how the story goes anyway. Could be just a dialectic that we're talking about. Yeah, so Augustus says, unbelievable that starving artisans accomplished this architectural wonder, and yet our grad students are well-fed and unable. Exactly. So if anybody should be able to have the time and energy and, I guess, resources, power tools, and all of that to do it, it would be this generation, probably not that one, according to history books. But yeah, here we are. And so, yeah, this is a whole kind of, goes through the court case of this woman, St. Margaret, and this shrine. It's in this shambles area, so you can just go in and you can sit there and pray to her. It's very odd. And they actually have the crucifix with Jesus on it. So this is a Catholic shrine, and they do pray to saints. They do. And it's unfortunate. Another one of the things I saw here was a society of alchemists, and, early witchcraft, I would say probably after the millennial reign was rife, as it was emerging once the enemy was loosed. And so we can see kind of that remnant history in these places. Just some old architecture here. This is York, and another beautiful church there. And I can't remember the name of this church, but I found this interesting. So above the main door, you have this pillar here, and some very interesting portrayals here. I'm wondering if that's St. Peter or if that's meant to be Jesus. And then you have these two sort of female figures on either side, and angels. And so people are either going into heaven or they're going into hell on that side. And it's like this judgment seat, maybe. And I was wondering if that was supposed to be the New Jerusalem, depicted above the seat. There's just so many beautiful buildings that it's hard to sit down and study them all. So we just have to see what our eyes actually see. And the only thing I noticed here was that that lamb is actually kind of sitting next to and behind Queen Elizabeth's statue, which is kind of an interesting place. You know, the only lamb that we really would know of in the millennium would be the Lamb of God, Jesus Christ. And so it's odd to see it in that condition and depicted in that way. Something else just regarding the architecture, you know, these older wooden buildings tend to go a bit saggy after, I guess, a few hundred years. And yet the kind of brick ones keep their shape a little bit better. And the old, what they call the Roman wall that goes around York. I think I had another picture of it there. Oops. So you can drive your car through that. And there's a number of gates throughout the city around the main part of town. This is another one here. And you'll notice there are kind of sentries on top, knights guarding the city. And I will be talking more about York in my studies, but this just gives you a visual to work with when you think about what is it like there. I'm going to stop sharing it, and then I'll move over to my France pictures. How's everyone doing in the chat? We were in Yorkshire, yes, Adam. Yeah. So love the tour. Peace and grace be with you. Time for bed. Okay, Ada. But yeah, I'm going to go over to France now. So it is a work week. I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to start with flying into France across the English Channel. Just got the right screen here. Okay. So I had a window seat, which was amazing. And also the weather was great. And so flying in, I got really excited because I could start to see this beautiful coastline here. And this is basically Normandy, which is where we went. And yeah, look at that flat earth, right? I agree. And actually I'll talk a bit more about that, but these cliffs are very matched with the ones across the English Channel on the England side, which are the cliffs of Dover, obviously. Across the pond, yeah, Alfredo. And so the sun was just coming up. It was a very early morning. And you can see there's like a river coming in here. And so the beaches of Normandy are traditionally understood from our history, our more recent history, world wars and things like that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I thought it looked kind of like the ice wall, actually. You know, if you go by tradition or modern science, it will tell you that this shouldn't be here because, you know, erosion and evolution. Why would we have these massive cliffs here? So some of this speaks maybe a little bit to Pangea. I haven't thought too much about it, but yeah, the fields of Normandy are very flat. It's a farmland, and it's just so beautiful. These beautiful cliffs. And so, yeah, flying in was really interesting. I was really thinking about where we were going to be going. And obviously the beaches is one of the places that we went, the beaches of Dover, or the beaches of Normandy. As we went, after we landed, we started driving towards the coast, and we came across this very curious place. This is actually a little church in a place called Martinsville. And these caskets are pretty much all soldiers that died in probably the Second World War, but maybe some of them also in the First World War. And so a lot of these caskets, you'll see the cross, this kind of cross, and you'll also see a lot of crucifixes, and there's a castle right next to it as well, which was really stunning. This church was pretty humble in appearance, and it didn't stand out as kind of a, an exquisite building in and of itself. It actually felt a little bit dark. It didn't feel very nice, actually. But what I found was, I noticed the sides of the building are really strange. But I'll first show you. So yeah, most every burial plot had a crucifix with Jesus on it, which was a change from England, because England did not have crosses as much with Jesus on them. They had more the Protestant version of the cross, which does not have Jesus on it. And so that was really interesting. And let me just look at who's chatting here. Yeah, I agree, Alfredo. Traveling in the old airships would have been incredible. I really want one, actually. I think we should start bringing them back. Actually, I have a whole range of clothes. Well, not a whole range. I have T-shirts and hoodies that say "Bring Back Airships," if anybody wants to go and buy them. All the proceeds go towards the NFC. I don't make any profit. I do try and raise money for the NFC. But yeah. So these bricks that were all over this church looked very melted. And actually, Topher agreed with me. I asked him about this, and he says they look like they've come under extreme heat. And I thought it kind of looked like maybe they had been all charred, and then someone had to clean off the front and basically chipped off the fronts of all of these, because they don't look very clean. But they do look like melted, and it's just a very, they were all over the church, some of them dark and some of them this light color. So that was really, yeah, I think it is melted, Zabian. I think it is. I think these were melted, and this must be a very old church. Yeah, right. It looks totally fried. You could even see almost like I don't know, like remnant of the fire around the edges and in between. Someone tried to clean it up, and it looks like they took, they just like sliced off the front of whatever was charred on the front of it. But this, you can see the whole church is just covered in these bricks. It was fascinating. But yeah, not a very ornate church in and of itself. And again, they just have this crucifix here. These are all over the place in France. There's even at the front of towns, there's these big, massive crucifixes with Jesus nailed to the cross. And here it just says Commonwealth War Grave. And Commonwealth is a very deceiving word, actually. It's actually more to do with communism. So the wealth of the whole, the group, you share your wealth, you share all your toil, and you all kind of do this thing together. So it's a little bit more of a communist thing. I mean, I never really had thought about Commonwealth before in that way, but yeah. So this is the town we ended up staying in, city, I should say, and it's the main city in Normandy, and it's called Caen, which is spelled Caen. I'll just type it in the chat in case that anybody wants to check it out. Okay, so what I thought about this when I very first went, or when we started to really think about where we wanted to go, this was put into my mind about a year ago. And so I thank the Lord that he made it possible for us to actually go here. It's a lovely little, well, it's hard to tell if it's big or small. It's a beautiful place. And we were quite amazed at actually how nice it was, because I was more interested in the history of the place, but it actually turned out to be a very beautiful place as well. Sadie, we were there in August, September, or late August, early September. So yeah, just a few weeks ago, actually. And I showed that picture of that building in York, which was like black and white. So the black was the timbers and the white was the plaster. But in France, a lot of the buildings are red and white. And I don't know exactly why they did it differently, but I found that interesting. And we kind of walked a lot of these little streets, and it's a very beautiful place. This cathedral, I'll make this bigger. You can see that. We stayed, and it was a Catholic, which most of them are Catholic church. So the functional church was still, being used actively, but they had let a lot of it go into ruin, and it was just run over. But it actually had a lot of stained glass still in it, so it was just empty, but it looked really beautiful in kind of a way. There was no, doors and glass or anything on it. It's very nice. And then there was this other kind of church. I don't know. Church is people, right? It's not a building, but this building was a little different. If you compare the two, that one has a big steeple on it, and this one has more of an Asian looking thing going on. So you can see the decor is a little bit more Eastern, I would say. I don't know. Has anyone been to the Far East? I think it just looks a little bit more like that. And then it also had these numbers on it. And that just I just took a picture of that. And again, it's a little bit open, a little bit like it's not in its original state here. But even the top of it was quite less ornate as the other one. And I have a feeling this is a little bit more what I would call Jesuit. It's right behind the city kind of hall or palace, and it's actually connected. So it seems to me that it was kind of more connected to government and that kind of thing. And they have a lot of these around. These are people that were kind of recognized for their efforts during wars and things like that. But yeah, that's that building. I hate to call it a church because we know the church is us, the people. But I guess maybe a cathedral, a chapel, whatever you want to call it. And here is more of the town. And I just really like all the very old bookstores in these European towns. I spent quite a lot of time in bookstores, and I picked up, thank the Lord, a few books. So that was really helpful, especially towards the research that I'm going to be doing. They were all in French, and the person working there did not speak English. So I had to use my Google app, my Translate app, and actually find the book that I wanted. But I prayed, actually. I said, Lord, please lead me to the right book. And I do believe he has. And so that's going to be going into my next series called Silence. And I hope you all join me for that. So this church here is one of the main cathedrals. I think it's called St. Peter, and it's in Cannes. It was the first thing we saw as we drove into town. It's just stunning. It actually becomes more stunning the more you get into it. You can just see the detail all along the sides of this church, this building, this cathedral. So many cymatic features on it, and it's absolutely immense. Like it's actually crazy. Yeah. And they still have these little clasps. I don't know what to really call them, but I think something that I was wondering was, would they string lights down here with copper wire, and so that the energy, the frequency that was being harvested would have lit up this whole church or this whole cathedral. I just wonder. The bells were all in here, And so the frequency and vibration, the resonant frequency, would have just been incredible. Antiquitech, yes. It's absolutely stunning. And you know, the sad part about these, and this is what I want to talk about just a little bit, is all the gargoyles that don't appear to be made of any of the same material as the rest of these. So you can see slabs or blocks that were carved. And I don't know, I've been of the view for a while that these things are actually added on later of some kind of, you know, like a type of cement. Yeah, they're grotesque. They really are. Like, sorry, trigger warning. I don't want to scare anybody, but these are really not nice. I do believe they're demonic, and I don't know what the purpose for them was, other than maybe to scare people, keep them in fear, kind of like what they're doing now. You know, there's a lot of tactics that the enemy has used over the years to keep people afraid. So maybe before television and radio and all of these other electronic forms, is it possible that these things kept people scared and subjugated? I don't know. I'd be scared if I was living near that and walking past it every day. But yeah, the inside was really beautiful. The organ here. So to get to the organ, where the person would sit here or sits here, and they walk along this little hallway, and they get into the organ through there, and it's way up in the heights of the building. Let's see what everyone's saying. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Amen, Rumford. Alfredo, rebar and cement. Okay. I think when they were let's say through the different events like this one we're seeing now, I mean, why couldn't that be the time where they just added all of these features on? That's what I'm wondering, is if in their remodeling reconstructions, did they actually add to it? And the other thing I'm wondering is, why is there so much mud? Like, okay, buildings fall down and all of that, but there seems to be excess mud and dirt. These are pictures from inside that they used to catalog. So this is an example of the extreme amount of dirt and I guess rubble that, you know, it doesn't look that destroyed. Like, it doesn't look to the point where it would have that much, you know. I agree, be thankful. I don't think Jesus would have had any images on these buildings either. But yeah, so this is some of the deconstruction, reconstruction photos. But this was what they show us as the original. So the city of Caen was built kind of within walls, and it was built, there was like a canal that went around it. There's rivers, and the canals are actually still there. But it looks a lot different now because I guess those previous pictures show there was a lot of destruction, you know, world wars, and I would say intentional breaking down of the old architecture. But that is just beautiful. You know, during the millennial reign, I do believe that this is more what it looked like. And interestingly, I don't see gargoyles on there. So whether that's significant or not, I don't know if I'm looking at that right. But yeah, that's my theory. I do think they were added. I don't think they were necessarily always there. And so here you can see the city was actually built. It looks quite empty according to this narrative, and that there was this wall around. There is a castle here as well. So yeah, so then there's this canal that goes all the way around, and there's just this massive wall. And we don't, excuse me, we don't have walled cities now. which is a big change, actually, from what I think the older days had. And there's some construction happening on the building. And that looks more like the 1800s, possibly. Now, one thing I want to point out, and this is going to be part of my studies coming up, and this is just I guess, a plaque remembering Henri of Orleans, the Orleans, which is an area right near Caen. And I think there was some governor that ruled over that area. And one thing I want to call out here is that the Comte de Jésus. Now, something I have found out of the Comte de Jésus is actually of the Society of Jesus, which is the Jesuit society. And that's something that was on one of the maps that we've seen in the past in the region of the North Pacific. And the Land of Jesus, often in later maps, actually has this on it. So that's part of what my study is going to include, which is one of the reasons I actually wanted to go to this place, because I think it is one of the original hotspots, initial locations of the Society of Jesus, where they kind of headquartered a lot of their movement from, in many ways. Let's say during the later parts of the French Revolution, and a lot of that stage is where they kind of emerged and started to form what they call congregations. And so, yeah, they were very oppressed because they were not welcome, and they ended up taking positions of authority in certain areas strategically, you see. So I'll just keep going through some pictures here, and you'll see that the history of this place is very significant. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go to the bookstore. And I also wanted to understand the lay of the land and what was actually going on in these areas. And this was a very pivotal area in the French Revolution as well. And so this is the law, the building of the Palace of Law. I can't remember what the exact name of it is. Oh, Can Palais. But it actually had the justice courts here. So you can see the law tablets there, which kind of mimic what we know of as the Mosaic tablets of the law. But these actually emerged from the French Revolution. So the law of liberty, carnal liberty, and how they were going, humanitarian liberty, that kind of thing. Let me see. Sadie, I loved your Wall of China video leading to the Land of Jesus. Yeah, that was a really interesting find. My friend actually cued me to, hey, is this actually a road? And then I said, hey, is this a highway? But yeah, that sort of wall, the Great Wall of China, is definitely interesting. It's okay to be off topic. There's no real schedule here. But yeah, I do believe it went right across from really France, Germany to East Asia, right to the coast of Asia. So it makes sense that people could get onto the highway and travel in peace. During the millennial reign, they could go all the way to the New Jerusalem on that highway. So yeah, I've just taken some video footage here. It's amazing how much you notice when you're walking around places with the understanding that we live in this post-millennial world, post-millennial reign world. And one other major character here is actually William the Conqueror. So Caen and Normandy is known for William the Conqueror, and he was made emperor of France, I think France or Europe, here in Caen. And so there's just a close-up of the tablets, the law tablets. And there's a lot that you notice as well in France of an occult nature. So here is what I would think of as Prometheus holding a fasces. That's the rod, the bound rods, and the Republic Française, and that's a notary. But so occultic when you realize what we know as the angel that disguises himself as an angel of light, Lucifer, and all the symbolism of the French Revolution, the Liberty cult, governing out in the open. And yeah, so William the Conqueror, I am going to be sharing what I found about him as well. But he is immortalized here, immortalized in a statue here. And again, quite occult symbolism going on here, pagan imagery. And, it really is all about paganism rising, I believe. When you start looking at the people, the characters, what did they do? What changed? What kind of changes did they bring to society after we know what was the kingdom of Jesus? And we still live in the kingdom of Jesus, but for that time period while Satan was bound, there was no deception. There was no, outward rebellion. If anything, it had to be hidden. It had to be kept away. People were imprisoned. It was shut down, paganism included, which was a rebellion. It was a spiritual rebellion, right? J. Nunn says 13 rays of sun on his crown. Oh yeah, okay. I hadn't counted them, but that makes total sense. Yeah. Yeah, the ascending ancients. So you said, how do you think we are going to be able to get to the camp? I don't believe in Mount Meru. I think that's a misnomer in my view, because the Bible talks about Zion. Some people say they're the same thing, but the Bible talks about Zion. So I just use biblical language to describe that. But yeah, I think the Bering Strait is definitely a gateway. It even describes it as that. If you go to Google Earth, it calls it the straight gate, straight narrow gate to the north. And so, yeah, I do believe it is the area that we would go to. But we obviously have to wait on the Lord for any direction in that way. God always gives his people the right information, the right timing. It's all in God's time, right? That's the key. But yeah, so here's William with his laurel wreath on his head, holding what looks like maybe a crown of some sort, and his helmet's on the floor. So he's conquered. And it even looks like a bit of a snake in behind on the side of that post there. And all of this pagan imagery here as well. And here is William the Conqueror's tomb. So they imagine that he is now glorified as some kind of god, I guess. It's a strange winding thing on the cross there. I don't know what that's for. And also, yeah, that's a snake and an orb. I guess that's supposed to be, the sphere of something Gnostic, obviously. But, they imagine themselves to become gods because of the works that they've done. And they don't tend to believe in Jesus Christ as their savior. They think they are their own savior, and that's the biggest lie of all. So yeah, his tomb is actually in this place called Saint Etienne, Saint Stephen's in Caen. And that is the wall of the castle, Caen Castle. And the story of that is that around 1060, William, Duke of Normandy, built this castle where his palace was standing. And he and his wife, Matilda of Flanders, founded an abbey for men and women. And so, yeah, this is a dynastic foundation. So the Normans were founded here in Caen. And that's why it's called Normandy. And that's a really horrible looking thing, but that's supposed to be them. Talk about loss of artistic ability in our day and age. Okay, so the as we drove towards the beaches of Normandy, there's just a lot of marketing around D-Day. And I do find that ironic because only a few decades ago, like, let's see, not even 100 years ago, it was a killing field. It was a bloodbath. And today we celebrate this by selling merch. You know, it's a very cheap way to treat the people that died and the generations of this was a really hard trip for me personally, emotionally. I felt very emotional on the day that we actually went to the beaches of Normandy. Okay, bye, Adam is loopy. And just going back to Con for a minute. So this is Joan of Arc. Again, they're immortalizing these people. And this little plaque here talks about the racist persecutions and anti-Semitic crimes that were fought against by the French Republic in the 40s. So from 1940 to 1944. So that was World War II. And it's behind this church here. And this church is this cathedral is absolutely covered in these horrible looking gargoyles. And this church is not in very good shape either. You can see it's kind of ruined around certain areas of it. It's even got like growth coming out of it. Yeah, some of them look like flying pigs to me. That's like a pig head and then some wings on it. And they still hold mass there. And they have the Antiquitech features, but very ugly. And some of them have this dual kind of gargoyle thing going on. So like this one on top of that one. I don't like to look at them too much, but yeah, they're pretty much all over these old cathedrals. I never knew how really widespread this was, but it is everywhere. And considering that the building itself is quite run down, these are in pretty good shape, which tells me they were added later as well. Because if anything, things that are sticking off are going to be they're going to fall off before kind of a more structural piece is going to be degraded. So that's another reason why I think these are added later, because they're in too good condition. Yeah, they're totally out of place. They don't even fit with the design. So everything else is symmetrical. Everything else is cymatic. Everything is beautiful. So it doesn't make any sense that these would have been built on it at the same time. And I'm just going to skip through more of these, but yeah, you can just see they're everywhere. I was just shocked at how many there were. And that's like an owl. I don't know. It looks like an owl. And anyway, so yeah, a lot of the degradation you can just see that took place. Empty placeholders for what would have been probably saints and that kind of thing. Often you see this image of this, like a person with what I think is the demon. And it made me actually think of those movies. Someone will remind me, but where they have their demon spirit animals, the children. And it just reminded me of this kind of yoking with evil spirits. That's kind of what it made me think of. The Golden Compass. I think that was the series. Yeah. Yeah. So they often pair like a person with what I'm pretty sure looks like a demon. And that guy doesn't have one. So I don't, it looks like a knight, maybe that guy. And so this is called the Street of Martyrs. And this goes into the Jesuit thing as well. And I want to show you what I walked past here. So I was just walking back to the cathedral and I noticed this wall. Yeah, those images are horrible. I agree, freedom lover. Yeah, so this wall is covered in these 6-pointed stars, and then there's an eight piece lampstand there on the gate. Yeah, so I was like, what is this? Obviously, it's some type of synagogue, but that is basically a memorial to the Jewish opponents of Hitler, the barbarian. It says barbarian Hitler. I agree, Alfredo. Why would they build those beautiful cathedrals just to put something ugly on them? And inside the church of St. Peter, they have lots of these little nooks. And this one is supposed to be Jesus, which is just, I don't know, that is just insulting in my view. I don't think that's Jesus at all. So I'm going to move over to the pictures of Normandy beaches. I do have a lot to show, but I think it's worth... Actually, I'm going to go to Mont Saint-Michel because I think that will be a nice one to go to first. And is everyone enjoying the pictures? Is everyone having a nice time? Are you chilling? There's a lot to see here, but I hope I'm doing it justice. Okay. It's not allowing me to share that screen for some reason. Hang on. Okay, so we're going to go to Mont Saint-Michel. And the story of Mont Saint-Michel is actually really important in the study of the little season, right? Because we know that Satan was thrown into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years, and it was the angel that actually threw him in there and locked the gate, sealed him in there. And yeah, so I didn't even know when we booked this trip that we were going to be this close. I just felt like this was... I'm glad you're all enjoying it. Yay! I don't do these very often, so thanks for bearing with me. But I didn't actually know we would be this close, and it was really exciting. And so we had to do it, obviously. So they have the parking worked out really well to get here, but you have to walk a long way or take a little bus. And there used to be a natural causeway that you would have to wait for the tide to go down, and then you could walk across. But these days they have a boardwalk, and they have like a little road where the buses with people go on. And you can just see how built up it is, how medieval, and the wall is still in place. It's a very well kept site. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And if you're... Thank you, Corey. That's very encouraging. And if you're ever in the north of France, I highly recommend going here to check it out. It is built on a rock. Isn't that amazing? Because everything is so flat. The farmland around it is just so flat. It's stunning when you're driving across the sort of farmland area. It's really amazing just to see it. Sorry, that's a bit sideways, that one. I will get a better picture here. But yeah, you can just see like people hang out on the beach, on the sand. It's very sandy and just exquisite. It stands out from the landscape in such a shocking way. Like, I'm surprised more people don't have accidents. Well, they probably do have a lot of accidents because the roads are really windy and really fast. And there's a lot of people that aren't from France driving around. So it's like Mario Kart. It's pretty scary. You're very welcome. Be thankful. Chris from Old World Exploration should see your work. Yeah, I like Chris. He's really good at what he does. I often tune in just to watch and see. There's so much to see. But one of the things my husband was commenting on is where would they put the scaffolding? It's hard to get perspective from these pictures, but it's just straight up. There's really no ground, like it's just straight up. It would be really hard to put, I think, a scaffolding, not that I am a builder, but just from what I've seen, scaffolding kind of needs places to get their footing, right? So that would be a very difficult one to build. And this whole place is very well kept. You could just see for miles. And there's another little gargoyle there sticking out. They get everywhere. And as I was walking up, I noticed this one area. It looked like an old entrance, actually. And I wondered what had happened there. It looks like it's been intentionally destroyed. I like seeing the anomalies with places, not just the nice sides of things. And so I always look out for things that stand out as being a little bit weird. So this one here has got the stairs. And what's really strange is I think a lot of the old structure may have actually been built of rock. And then they had to come in and kind of restructure it with brick, because all of those broken pieces are rock. And you can kind of see it all broken off there. It just seems like it might have been an entrance at one point. And again, so built on that rock, I wonder how many layers is underneath there. And so the story of this place should be that the angel bound Satan and threw him into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. That's what the story should be. But as you'll see in a few minutes, that's not really where they went with it. But what a beautiful, beautiful scene here. I got this really cool glare coming down the middle. And yeah, so I think they restructured a lot of this with rock and masonry. But again, it would have been very difficult to build. But it also gives the impression that there might be layers underneath, like tunnels and things like that. And yeah, that just gives you some perspective from standing at the bottom of it. And this is like a lift where they would have lifted like a funicular, I guess, some kind of mechanism that they would have hoisted supplies up into that level of I don't know if it's a castle or a cathedral at this point, but yeah. So that's some old world technology right there. And you can see how flat the land is around there and how high up actually we were at this point. And they had military on site with guns. Their guns were actually ready for action. It was interesting. I don't know why, but yeah. So that's Normandy. That's kind of that area. And then I saw a real crossover of masonry going on here. So I saw this kind of brick here, and then there's this other kind of brick kind of laid under it, and then these rocks, which I think the rocks may have actually been more part of that original structure. They're kind of laying all over the place. And I'll just take you through some of the views of this. So now we're above a lot of the buildings that are on the rock as well. And as you look down, you can just see them all. It's a very beautiful little place. A lot of little hatches that go somewhere as you're walking up. And stairways here and there. And actually, a lot of those buildings are being used for retail, so commercial, touristy kind of things. But I noticed that there's this disconnect, and this almost looks like melted rock under here. And this disconnect here looks like it's been kind of patched over. So yeah, some kind of blending of structures there, I think. it would have been hard to recreate something like that. So the church at the top is obviously very Catholic, as is everything in France. And so they have these depictions of Jesus on the cross everywhere. And I'll just fly through these fairly quickly, but these are really the presentation that they give for the meaning of this place, which is way off. The meaning of the place is that the millennial reign happened and Satan was bound. And I think these places, like there's one in England as well, these places were actually there to remind people that Satan was bound. He was in the pit. And there was this celebratory, I think they speak to a celebration of that, in my view, and the conquering of Jesus. But what they do here is they add in all the Catholic teachings. And so Mary, Queen of Angels, and there's this whole prayer to Mary, right? Which is very sad. Let's see, what are people chatting about? Alan Nichols, you're very welcome. I feel like not many people get the opportunity to go there. I didn't even think I'd be going there, so I felt I had a duty to bring it back and show you all. Yeah, German castles seem to look similar. I haven't been to Germany, Corey. But yeah, they do look similar to that. You're welcome, Val. Yeah, so really what they make this out to be is more, if we imagine St. Michael was the one who bound Satan and threw him in the abyss, what they've done here is they've changed the whole story. They talk about, praying to St. Michael and all of this kind of garbage. And they talk about the angels, the different kinds of angels, and even using this kind of imagery to show that hierarchy. And they use a little bit of scripture, but probably not in context. So even here, the angels and the depiction of what was the Lamb of God, again, I don't really like that imagery. I'm not sure if it's if it's okay, but they talk more about the angels in the picture than they do about Jesus, and it's just really off. All of the messaging is really off with this. It's really just focusing on angels and Catholicism and teaching you to pray to angels as well. And here was a very disturbing thing. So it says here that Mary was raised above the 9 choirs of angels, her divine son. So not even naming Jesus, how rude. Placed her on a resplendent throne at his right hand. No, he didn't. That's not biblical. And then talks about the coronation of Mary not being explicitly described in the Bible because it didn't happen. And it's deeply rooted in Catholic traditions and doctrines. And therefore, that Catholicism is highly pagan, because in the Old Testament, the Queen of Heaven was actually Ashtaroth and Lilith. So we have to be aware that when we're talking about Catholicism, a lot of Catholics don't even realize the meaning of what they're, and it's not, they should really study what they believe, honestly. Because they might not even agree with what they profess to be a part of. So I encourage that. And then talks about the woman clothed with the sun, as in Revelation 12, and again, just blowing Mary out of proportion in relation to the focus of our worship. And she was a person just like the rest of us, and there was never given any kind of higher authority or position to Mary, and there was never prophesied any position to be given to her either. So yeah, that was really disappointing, but I was not surprised. It goes in line with everything else you see in France and the Catholic faith there. And so we were actually too late to get in for a tour of the actual cathedral at the top, but I just imagine it was more of the same. So we didn't, we ended up heading back down. But one thing I did notice is that on this sign, it says, visit to Mont Saint-Michel, 1,000 years of history. So just a little nod to the millennial reign. And it says there's dungeons, prisons, etc. And this whole family here is actually connected to the families, the royal or the influential families of Germany, like East Europe. And so, yeah, so there's a little bit more. And this is a plaque that recognizes the rights of Canada here on Mont Saint-Michel, which I found quite interesting. I'm going a little bit quicker because I have to show you the beaches of Normandy. So this little chapel here was to Joan of Arc. And really, this was the only thing that I saw that related to the binding of Satan at all in this whole place. And this was in the chapel of Joan of Arc. And there she is. She gets more preeminence, I think, than the actual event. Some beautiful architecture there. So I'm going to stop sharing and we'll go over to the beaches of Normandy. Is everyone hanging in there? Let's see. So I think we'll go to, I want to tell you about the beaches of Normandy a little bit and what I believe actually happened there. And so the beach called Juno Beach was where the Canadian troops came on onto the beach on the 6th of June, 1944. And that was, oh shit, okay, hang on, I'll just close these. I have a few things open and it doesn't like it. Okay, so the Canadian forces in the Second World War are known for coming onto the beaches on the 6th of June, just with all the other forces, and they all went on to different beaches. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. So I will share some pictures if it lets me. Oh, it's not letting me. I think I'm going to have to close some things here. Something about D-Day doesn't sound right. Yeah, what do you think D-Day refers to, like, more realistically? I was thinking like Day of Dominion, like Dominion Day, or, you know, when they took official Dominion. I couldn't figure out really what it meant from a alternative position, let's say. Like, I know what they say it means, but I'm thinking more along the lines of you know, what does it actually mean from the post-millennial reign perspective? I guess that's what I'm wondering. Well, it's not letting me share it, and I want to, so I'm just going to keep trying here. Hang on. It's very odd. So yeah, it's not letting me share this now, and so anyway, I may not be able to show you the rest of the pictures. I'll try shutting that down and see if it lets me do it. But yeah, how does everyone feel so far about Mont Saint-Michel? Will you plan a trip there? Would you like to go? I think for me, so one of the main reasons we went to Normandy, I felt like, here's my theory. I'll give you a theory, an alternative theory, that the name Caen, C-A-E-N, when you say that phonetically in English, it actually says Cain. And I think that there's a connection between Cain, the end or the loosing of Satan, and the shedding of the mass murder is what I would call it, that the D-Day landings actually was. And I think that this was like retribution for the millennial reign, for the binding of Satan, for the persecution they felt that was put against them, the people that had to be emancipated after after the millennial reign. And I think that this was a blood sacrifice on the beaches of Cain. I think Cain is the key word. And that was one of the reasons why I actually wanted to go there, because I wanted to, I actually knelt on the beach and I prayed and I cried out to God and I cried and I just repented for any part that I have in my consent for those events and on behalf of my family. And, the thing about it is that often we don't even realize, but when we go to like Memorial Day, or in Canada, Remembrance Day, it's not that I'm disrespecting the people that died. They were very innocent lives that were lost. They thought they were doing the right thing. They had been recruited. They were told that they were being brave, that they were fighting evil. And certainly there was evil happening. So that was not, not out of their understanding, but to pick up guns and shoot each other, young men from both sides actually killing each other and shedding each other's blood on these beaches on that day. And I can't show you the pictures, but it was a very moving time. There was almost nobody there. And I had a long time of prayer and just revoking consent to that moment in history that I believe we were lied about, we were lied to about, and has been really sold as this wonderful event. Yet so many, such a generation of young men were killed on both sides. And I think it's just, it was shocking to me to see how many structures had been pre-planned, pre-engineered, constructed. I have so many pictures to show you. Maybe I'll do another one follow up to this. But there was a lot that was all, the infrastructure that was there, the war industry, the war machine that was prepared for that event tells me it was all premeditated. It wasn't just a fly-by-night job. It was actually very premeditated, planned, and executed, literally. And that's how I see it. And I do believe that God wants us to kind of take back what we consented to, in a way. I have a lot to say about the war theme in our generation, but it is getting a little bit late. So I did want to give you an update on the trip that the person that we prayed for fed back to me. So I'll be reading it, and I want to share her pictures. So I'm going to try, but if it doesn't let me, I hope that this is good enough. So she went to Kodiak Island in Alaska, and let me just see if I can share these pictures that she took, because I really want to be able to give feedback on the findings of what her trip produced. Oh, I can't show you pictures, unfortunately. Maybe I will try and put them onto a post after. However, I will read to you what she wrote. So she wrote that she was letting the Lord, I'll write as if she's talking because this is how she's writing. So the Lord led me while I was there. Thank you to everyone who is praying for us and this journey. So I traveled to the island of Kodiak and was there for about 3 days. My husband and I led particularly to the Aleutian Island area by the Lord. I had been asking if there was a way to his kingdom and have considered many potential access points. Yet the Aleutian archipelago seemed to stand out to us. 30 years ago, I had previously lived for a summer in Chignik, Alaska, which is the first ferry stop across from Kodiak Island, down the Aleutian chain. Unfortunately, our trip got shortened due to family health issues, and I was only able to be on Kodiak Island. However, the Lord led me to some interesting discoveries. My first observation of Kodiak Island is that there are no visible cell towers or any other towers that are outside the small fishing town of Kodiak. When driving on the island, which only has roads to access the east side of the island from the north to the south of the island, it is all rugged nature. I had experienced the same feeling 30 years ago when I lived in Chignik. There is something about that land that is unlike any I have ever experienced in the lower 48 states. It is wild and rugged, and I was able to hear the Lord's prompting very clearly while I was there. She wrote to me, Madeline, that I wouldn't be surprised if there was part of the land of Jesus, as I felt so at home there and didn't want to leave. So she wrote to me that she wouldn't be surprised if this was part of the land of Jesus. I found it curious that there was no road system whatsoever throughout any of the mountainous areas that led to what they call the west of the island, if you were to look at the modern map. The military seems to have a strong presence there, though it is not always visible. I met Canadian military from Ottawa who was sent there to Kodiak Island for training, to train others in our military. My impression is that the militaries from various countries could be working together on joint exercises in the north, though that is just my speculation. I also met an Italian engineer who was flown in from Italy to work on building a new natural gas pipeline underground, which follows along the same path as the old pipeline from Prudhoe Bay. Kodiak Island runs completely on wind power from these large GE windmills that are on top of the mountain overlooking the town. Everyone there pays for their own wind-powered electricity, just like we pay our electric bill in the lower 48 states. This was an indication to me of the move of the UN towards their green agenda, renewable energy. The fishing industry is very important to Kodiak Island, and what I learned was that most of the canneries along the coast of Alaska from Kodiak heading westward have been closed. Apparently, there used to be over 20 or more canneries, but now there are only 3 major ones, Pacific Seafood and 2 others. One could liken this to the corporate box stores consolidating monopolizing business in the lower 48 states. I also learned from the fishermen that, 1, the waters are very regulated in terms of being able to fish them now. There are contracts that fishing vessels purchase to be able to fish in certain waters, including the waters around Kodiak Island, the Bering Sea, and part of the Aleutian Islands. The contracts that they purchase are for allotments of fish that they can fish in the waters. So, for example, one boat may have a contract whereby they can fish 2,000 salmon this season in certain waters. They cannot go over their allotted fish allowance. 2, the marine highway is just that. The waterways make up a marine highway, and that is also very regulated by radar. I think that this is a man-made highway and not necessarily the Lord's highway that we read about in Isaiah or other prophets when we read about those who return to Zion following the second coming of Jesus. I do wonder if and how the Lord would possibly lead us through these waters if we were seeking his kingdom, because the fishermen's stories about the Bering Sea that I heard is that the sea there is very rough and also has a mind of its own, which I found to be very fascinating and curious. Apparently, every ship that goes on the marine highway is known and tracked by radar. I also learned this from this fisherman who has been fishing in the Bering Sea and elsewhere, that there seems to be a depth of water to the Bering Sea that is very different from the water around Kodiak, the Kodiak Island, and possibly even the Aleutians. He said that the water around Kodiak Island is a deep emerald green, and that is what I saw in places off the docks as well. He said that's why they call it the Emerald Isle. However, when you get into the deeper waters off the Bering Sea, the water appears black because it is so deep. One fisherman described this scenario to me whereby he was on a Russian boat. The Russians, I learned, do take on Americans as their crew. That's interesting, which is a whole other topic. I personally don't. I do not believe that the Russians and Americans are adversaries. I do believe that they work together and have been for a long time, but those are my views. So when this fisherman was on the Russian boat, there appeared in the ocean a wall of water near the Bering Sea. He described this wall of water as being like a waterfall that made a huge, enormous wall in the middle of the ocean. The Russian captain that he was with, as he's called, stupid, as he wanted to try to climb that wall of water. The fishermen I was speaking with knew how to decipher a code that would allow them to climb the wall of water with their boat in a stairway-like fashion. He told me that they were attempting this for over 30 minutes, climbing this wall of water, attempting to get around it or over it. However, the fisherman was very concerned that their boat would literally be capsized or crack in half and urged the captain to turn back, and that they needed to turn back immediately. The captain did not know how to get the boat down off this wall of water, that it sounded like he was climbing in perpendicularly. The fisherman instructed the captain to reverse the boat aggressively and then turn quickly so that he can bail out of the wall of water and head back. Apparently, they did this, and it took about 6 minutes to get down the wall of water. The fisherman told me that they were going very fast, propelled down the wall of water. I am not a fisherman, however, I had never heard about walls of water spontaneously appearing in the ocean floor. This fisherman's story fascinated me more than anything else that I experienced on Kodiak Island. This fisherman also told me that these walls began appearing around and after January 16th. I have no idea why that date is of significance. The fisherman also told me that they were not able to cross a certain line in the ocean, and that they are told by Russians monitoring the line to go back if their boats head toward the line. I wasn't able to gather where that line was, but I think this warrants more research as well. I do think that it would be a worthy venture to speak with more fishermen who actually fish. Somebody posted my name. So I do think it would be a worthy venture to speak with more fishermen who actually fish the Bering Sea. I do search out more crab boats that go to the Bering Sea. However, the day that I went to see them at the other dock, there are 2 main docks in Kodiak, there were no other fishermen there. I am curious also about the reality show The Deadliest Catch, only because I personally think that they could be deterring people from going to the Bering Sea, especially if it is near the Bering Strait of Anian, and has anything to do with any kind of way to the kingdom, and they don't want people going there. But that, again, is my speculation and just a hunch at this point. When I was walking away from the fisherman who told me about the wall of water in the deep sea, the song Wonderwall popped into my head. Often the Lord shows me the songs that reveal how those who have constructed our society reveal things about his kingdom to us. When I looked it up, this is the chorus to the song Wonderwall. And all the roads we have to walk are winding, and all the lights that lead us there are blinding. There are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how, because maybe you're going to be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my Wonderwall. That's actually one of my husband's favorite songs. This is all just speculation. However, when I read these lyrics, I could see how the singer could be talking about Jesus Christ, and possibly the singer could be referring to some kind of wall. And I'm curious about whether this could be a wall of water in the ocean. The Lord led me to speak with certain people there who each had something to reveal about the area and what is happening there now. A Swiss fisherman who has lived on Kodiak for over 40 years told me it is changing so much as more folks move there. He also shared with me about native corporations and how the federal government has given people assets in that area, so that some of the native people, even though they may live in the villages, own huge assets of land, buildings, and companies. I went to the library there on Kodiak Island and Xeroxed more resources about the native people and the island to study them now. I do have a hunch about the native people in Alaska being connected with the millennial reign. However, I will be doing more study and research into this area as well. I met a couple who went on an Alaskan cruise and were able to dock at Sitka because of the rough waters. They were on a huge cruise ship, but the waters were so rough that many of the people were ill that day because of the rough seas. I only mention this because I'm very curious to determine what the water is like there, and if there's an actual way through the waters to his kingdom. Again, I think much more research needs to be done, and if the Lord wills, we are also looking forward to another trip to Alaska soon. Another Bering Sea fisherman who told me stories about the rough waters of the Bering Sea and how, according to the fishermen there, if you're cold, that just means you're not moving fast enough. And a fishing family that own eisalaska.com told me they use Starlink to upload their videos to YouTube, which takes them about 2.5 hours each upload. I was curious to find out what kind of internet they have there and how it works, because literally there are so few towers, and only in the town of Kodiak do you see any towers. And a native mom shared her stories and photos of the Northern Lights with me that people are able to view from Kodiak too. It was too cloudy for me this time, so I didn't get to personally view them. The Alaska Marine Ferry opens their service again in May, so if the Lord wills, that we may get to travel down through the Aleutians for more exploration. Thank you again for those of you who are praying for us. We so appreciate your prayers. It was a very long journey to get there and back, 8 plane rides in a week. Oh. However, I only want to continue seeking our Lord and his kingdom. Amen. We continue to pray for his guidance in all things. The Lord also showed me a full rainbow on my last day there. It was magnificent. Thanks so much to Madeline for all your research and thoughtful presentations. I do believe that Jesus Christ is opening the eyes of those who are seeking him earnestly. So thank you so much for that feedback. It was, I know it was a very long journey for you, so I appreciate that. And I know all of us here are benefiting from that information. And thank you all so much for being here. I know it's been a long one today, but I did want to get through some of that. And hopefully I'll do another one. I can show you the beaches of Normandy. And we'll meet again next time. May the Lord Jesus go with you all. Please just be encouraged. We are on the winning side, and we are with the Savior who loves us, who cares for us, and he will make a way. His timing is perfect. So go in grace, everybody, and take care. It's been great to see you all tonight. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week. Bye, all.